Now, there are going to be some understandings here on the first run-through main timeline. Although few changes have been done to it due to the counterforces and the ones that are pro-Atlantean timeline, humanoid groups and whatnot, and I've been talking about this other places, I will here focus on the years ahead of us. So the main timeline is back in play. That's the one that leads to disastrous futures. And it is run by... we're seeing it already. Let me just put it this way. I call it chaos entropy, because that will be the dynamics of this timeline, chaos and entropy. And that means that what we have been used to work in a specific way will not work as we have learned it so far. Some of the tendencies that will be pretty clear, which I'm already experiencing now, even though in Europe, as well as in Denmark and other places. What will be left of the 2-8 pillar and the 1-7 pillar will do their externalization as well. And that means that the souls of the 2-8 pillar will begin to emerge, come into play, and become part of this reality field. What's left of the 1-7 pillar is within the hybrid projects, and that's connected to parallel universal matrix. And they are still a little bit running around here for the next 20 years, just calling that, and then they will extract. And then, as always, when the high order level is gone from the biological form, then something else will come in and take over. And most likely that will be the 2-8 pillar. And that's how it was. The inverted groups from the 3-9 pillar and the contaminated, quote unquote, underworld infused from the disastrous timelines and reality fields that have been on this planet will be the last group of souls that will do their completion inside this reality field. They have some key signatures. One of them is anger. One of them is cheating, lying, manipulating, everything you have learned already as being, don't do that, including greed. So they will be run technically by the 7 mortal sins. Just put it that way. It sounds very Christian, apocalyptic, and very doomsday. And that's because we have been prepared for this for a very long time. It has been prophesied throughout the remaining 2,500 years that eventually this is what would happen. And we have had rise and falls of civilizations throughout the course of history, as we are aware of, that has gone through these same cycles where things end in hedonism and greed and wars and disasters and both environmental as well as cultural disasters that has led to the extinction of different groups within humanity. And now we are in the same process one more time. However, this time is not just going to be here or there, it's going to happen globally. So when everybody's saying, oh, there, the Third World War and whatever, we already had that. We had that in 1959 and we got recalibrated and shifted into a different timeline altogether, which originally was part of the first run through, by the way, that reality. So in a way, we will merge into the reality where that disaster actually took place and there was a small group that survived. But that Third World War is somewhere in the future. And since they are aware that the groups that came back, let's put it this way, the 5,000 people that were left of the original future humans, there was as first everybody joined in the project of changing things and making things better. As they traveled back in time, because they were highly infused with inverted and contaminated cybergenetics, they resumed to the original ways, but then taking the opportunity of the second run through and the third run through, because we've been doing that a couple of times, to change their power grid and their position within society. And these are some of the groups that are now rising to power. And they are rising to power within a specific agenda that's built on AI, that's built upon technology, and it's built upon the reverse engineering technology. And there you begin to understand what the reverse engineered projects, the extraterrestrial groups, etc., who they have been working with, and what the military project actually are, and what they're trying to do. And with that, enhanced genetics and augmented reality fields, etc., built upon technology. So they become the new kind of technocratic race, and they are now on the rise, and they're on the rise everywhere on the planet, and they become the leaders. They are becoming the new politicians, the leaders, the CEOs, and whatnot. And that means the rest of us will, all depending on what country we're living in, will experience this to various degrees. So because of greed, that is part of the 2-8 pillar, anger and greed, and the feeling of lack and the feeling of not being given what is rightfully ours, so to speak, there will be these sub-waves that will affect everybody. So even though it is unreasonable, we call it inflation right now, where the prices are rising, but technically it's the greed forces that are playing in. We are seeing everything becomes more expensive. We call it inflation, whether it's food or airplane tickets or electricity or whatever it is. It is the reason why it's not inflation, it's greed. So let's scratch out inflation and just call it greed, because everybody's got sufficient. But it's this fear of lack, and then it becomes the supply and demand, that instead of supply and demand for the common good, it becomes supply and demand for the few that has, and the few that hasn't got anything will have even less. So that's how things are going to go into the future. And those of us who are on the subsidiary timeline, we know this, we have seen it, we're aware of it. Yes, we get angry about it, but at the end of the day, there's no point, because then we might tap into these foundational energies that are running as a subcurrent from the 2-8 pillar throughout society, and by that, making people unstable and too easily shifting into anger modalities compared to what we have been used to. Let us just call it chaos and entropy, because that is society, environment, the world, everything we are dealing with. And it was like that in the first run through as well, because the choices humanity has done ever since the enslavement and the colonization has been, and prior to that, has been within a system that was on its last stage of civilization anyways. That's why it was possible to colonize it. So it's not that we have all of these golden times. That was before the timeline event. The moment the timeline event hit, this system was doomed. So it's just been a very, 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 very long doomsday, to put it that way. But there's no need to go into these line of thoughts. There's no need to go into that and thinking that. That's just what it's what is a doomsday? It's a judgment as a kind of completion. Whatever you've done, you will now have to correct this. You will get the chance to correct this. You will get the chance to do better. You will get the chance to undo the wrongful choices you made. And in this one, made the right choices. And for those who are going to go into this disruptive understanding of reality, which we're heading towards, we also need to understand disruption and what possibilities lies within that. It has been said by the esoterics that crisis is their best motivator for change. And there's no doubt about that. And it's a recognition that has been understood a long time ago, even by the ancient Greeks and everybody who has been working with energy and consciousness or philosophy or any ways or forms thinking about the existence of life. Crises arise when we have always, everything is on a spectrum. And when it gets too far to the left or too far to the right, it gets so imbalanced that there's only one way to get into the middle point, and that's through a crisis. If that last chance is not taken, that is the crisis, then these two extremes will be forced to go into their devastation cycles that leads to cessation completely. To be able to continue any forms of existence, it has to be in the middle point. It can swing to the left or to the right on the spectrum of whatever's going on, and we can kind of get imbalanced in whatever we are experiencing, emotionally, mentally, physically, and then it's up to us to get it back into the balance point where the core energies of our higher order energy system, as well as the connection point to the subsidiary timeline, will assist us in rebalancing and giving us the infusions that are necessary to withstand the external and internal forces of the main timeline. With that understanding, it is also clear that if we lose footing, we must get back into balance as quickly as possible. And in this line of work, I lost my footing a lot of times, because if you are at some point beginning to go, let's just say to one extreme of the spectrum of whatever spectrum you're on, well, then these things have to build a pattern. And once they begin to build a pattern, we get energetic parasites. And when we get energetic parasites, we'll link up to technology. And once we link up to technology, we link up to time, blah, 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 of the artificial fourth and fifth. And then things go in a direction we don't want it to be. Now we have got an extra thing that comes from beneath our feet, so to speak, from the planet itself. Because in a way, the last stages of the completion cycles of this planet is the planet itself. And that goes with the life forms that have been on it, the nature, everything that's part of the 2-8 pillar. That's the other pillar, the connection between self and others. And that also goes into the external environment, and that means the planet itself and how that has been utilized. Because others, aside from the reality field itself, which goes with the connection point to the Andromeda system, which we have got a 6-dimensional infusion. That's the end of that pillar. But as we go into the 2-8 pillar, the core of this one will be the dark galactic core in the 8th dimension. And that means that the infusions that are on the subsidiary timeline will come from the 9th dimensional level of the new Andromeda, whereas the main timeline that we are now entering into will be between the 2nd dimension of Venus, technically, and that's the 2-8 pillar, and the workstations and the people, the groups that were there. Venus was notoriously by a specific group of mammals we know as the Aldebarans, we know them as the ones that were inside this reality as the Baals, and other groups that have had the bull as their signal or signature, or what you call sigil, in any ways or forms that it has expressed throughout the course of history. And that ties up to the extraterrestrial groups that are part of the Orion collective in the 8th dimension. And that's connected to the dark galactic core. So this time, that one, all the timelines, the main timeline that is running on that one has no positive outcome. That should have been done in the 3-9 pillar. This one, the last 9 years we just went through, was the absolute last one. But since the Orion group came in 2017 and got us linked up to the Dark Galactic Core in 2017, it was game over there already in 2017, which we have seen. And then everything has just been part of that playbook to get the main timeline back into the game. And all of the things that are happening has been happening to fuel that timeline that were part of the 2-8 pillar. That means that these souls can rise up and reunite with the original versions of the first run through. So they are the first that are going to do the merging of the original version of themselves as part of the first run through. Because you see, once the alternate reality possibility no longer is there, even though it has played out already, in a way, it just reunites with the original path of least resistance. And that was the one that led to the first run through. And even though those of us who come back from the future would know it's already happened, but it is happening now again, because we are back in quote unquote time. And in that way, it is playing out one more time for those of us who came from the future. For those who have not come from the future, this is the first time they're experiencing it. But since they have not been in the future, they have not changed their ways. They're of course doing what they did as part of the first run through. So it's this, all of things are collapsing back into that big river of the 2-8 pillar and the original run through that took place. Those of us in the future, already happened, for those who have not in the future, or is happening now. And then they will go through the steps, which those of us who are from the future will know what it's about. So that's been kind of my thing this entire lifetime. I knew where it was going, but trying very hard not to fuel it due to the low participation and give it energy, but actually support the subsidiary timeline to the best of my abilities, and then being in that constant battle between the forces that wanted the first timeline to run its course as it originally was meant to, and then push those of us who were trying to create a different version of the first run-through timeline into the subsidiary timeline, but then as yet again still on the subsidiary timeline, pulling us into the artificial realities from where they could harness the energies of what we're building or trying to build on the subsidiary timeline. So it's this gives the understanding of this, and the full knowledge of this gives all of the reasons why things are going the way they're going, why things are complicated, and why it's been such a hardship for those of us who came from the future, etc., etc. And once we get that one settled and understood, well, then there is not the uncertainty. There's no doubt, and there is no this kind of weird gaps in our memory that makes us confused. Now, for at least that is how it is for me. Now, I kind of know how it is. That's how it is. This is what it is. So I don't have fear as long as it's not right in front of my doorstep. If it is right in front of my doorstep, because I've been in critical situations throughout my life in different ways and forms, then I will know I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it. If it comes to my doorstep, I'll deal with it. But I can definitely prepare for certain things. I know everything's going to be more expensive. You know that too. So how can you prepare for that? And some of you will say, well, then I stockpile a lot of stuff. But everything you stockpile, if it's food, it will rotten. If it's materialistic things, it will go into entropy eventually, and it will fall apart. So there's only so much we can build up as a kind of preparing and stockpiling and whatnot. So the solution is not stockpiling. The solutions are what we call dynamic solutions that can change. Solutions that can rapidly be changed into something else. And personally, of course, yes, I got the extra water bottles that allows me to store gallons of water if need be. If we get the heads up, you better do this because so-and-so looks like that. Then I can store up to 20 liters of water, assuming, because I live in Denmark, that some kind of solution will come within 2 to 3 days. They're preparing for that in Denmark, as in, okay, if this happens, whatever that is, how do we get water out to people within 3 days, etc., etc. Of course, there are which I haven't looked into yet, but that's another part of it, how to produce energy. Until I got as a side effect of how to produce energy is also the knowledge that if we do choose to produce energy ourselves, solar cells or whatever that can produce electricity, it will not be large amounts. So my work right now is that I'm cutting away all of the consumer too much over exploitation of the electromagnetic network, aka electromagnetic field around our planet, that we have been utilizing for all sorts of electric devices. And that means literally I have no fridge, I have no washing machine. I do have a spinner because I have been trying to do it without the spinner, and that gives other issues. And of course, if we get to the point where there is no electricity, well, then the spinner will be out of no use, and then of course I will live without the spinner. But that's one of the things I said. Until that happens, then that's a little bit of luxury I have, so that my laundry won't be so damn wet as it is when you are wringing it with your hands. Plus, it is straining on the body, which women of all ages that have been doing laundry in their hands know. I'm not using the oven. I'm just using the stove. And at some point, there has to be bought some kind of thing that can go on propane gas or something else. But gas is limited resource as well. If everybody shifts into gas, then that will be a limited resource, especially in Europe, where we have got most of gas from Russia and other places that has now been cut. So in that way, there are other solutions. And that's part of the work that I haven't looked into yet. That will come in the years to come. Once I've done with this, then I'll begin to rearrange myself within the base program as part of these nodal point cities cities or nodal point communities or nodal point individual housing situation with what is necessary there. Right now, I'm just literally minimizing every type of expense I have, every form of usage of any resource. I'm minimizing to the bone of what is possible and how, what that means. Because one thing is that if you run out of resources and you do it there, of course you will learn it. But it's easier as I see it, it's better to adapt while you have the resources, because then there's room for mistakes. And in a learning process, you'll make a lot of mistakes. I already made a lot of mistakes. And learning, for instance, this new house I'm renting, how to be on an island there's more storms here. The windows are not insulated. How I'm going to go around this, trying to do the usual stuff with insulation tape. That's not working because the building structure in itself is not, there are some big gaps beneath the window frames, etc., etc. All of these things. Then how do I go about this, which I've trained already in some of my other apartments. So it's just figuring out these things, what's possible, what's not, what can I order from the other side on the mainland. If that's not possible, how can I do groceries and what is important, and how can I shape and shave it all down to minimum requirements of food. And yes, quite a lot of food I have now requires water. So in that way, also learning to how do I minimize the usage of water, for instance, in washing clothes or in doing the dishes. But there are also the understanding of, for instance, yes, I can't just use cold water, because then there is this possibility of bacterial level in the pipes of the water that leads to Legionnaire disease as a kind of a long diarrhea kind of disease that goes with specific bacteria if the water's not warm enough. So all of these understanding of how does a house actually work, and what do we do have resources. In America, you'll probably say, well, we got a well. But that's just because the Americans is not up to snuff with the level of pollution of the water in the wells. They say, well, it comes from deep down the earth and it's clean. No, it's not, because the rain and everything that has run into these cavities of water, they are heavily polluted. So the water that is being pulled up through wells, which America, they're no filters, no whatever, they're just pulling it up from the underground and then drinking it because it's so healthy, they are literally poisoning themselves. So that needs to be filtered. There's so many things that needs to be figured out. But all of that will come within the next 5 to 10 years, when this realization of how we are to administer resources, what reality actually is turning into, how things are actually working, then all of the groups that will go into that will have to learn it the hard way. Whereas, again, in 2016, when I went to Australia and lived there were all of the challenges I had there on the insectoid level of the fourth dimension. All of the training I had there came in handy when we had the pandemic, because that was actually what I was trained for. So I was trained for it years ahead, like I'm being trained now years ahead of what's coming. So this is me adjusting to a future where resources are limited, and whatever is of resources will be super expensive. And how do we then minimize, and how do we live, how do we create surroundings and an environment where we can pay these extreme bills for electricity and water, because that's going to be here up in the north in Scandinavia, since we're not digging wells in the underground, whatnot. There'll probably be water that we can produce on our own. But since we, for instance, now here on the island, half of the water we get from the underground, the remaining water we get from the ocean. And we have already got technology that are cleaning the water from the ocean. So if we lose the water of the underground altogether, well, then we will have that technology that can clean it from the ocean. But the ocean will be more polluted. So there will be adjustments to this kind of technology. All of this there will be, compared to the first run through, there will be a larger group this time that will work with solutions. And they're part of some of the humanoid groups and some of the hybrids. And we will see how that will play out. I don't know that yet, because that's a section or a sector I'm not familiar with, and I don't want to have participation in it either. But there are unknowns that can change the first run through as it went the first time around into a different scenario this time around. But even in the first run through, there were these moments where we had success in different areas, including in the north on our planet, North Scandinavia and North Europe. We have success in producing water from the ocean, Scotland and other places that will be seen. Remember, anyways, this is difficult because right now Scotland or Britain is not part of EU, but technically it still is, even though it's on the paper it's not, it's still in the future seen as part of Europe, and they will reunite later on. So that's part of Northern Europe I'm talking about. In 10 years' time, Britain is back into Europe because of lack of resources and the whole understanding of, oh yeah, we're segregating because we're so much better ourselves. We will understand, no, we need to work together if we are to survive these changes. And that means sharing sciences, sharing innovations, sharing whatever our resources, etc., etc. And there are things that will play out that will come in different waves, and in different ways it's going waves, and it's going to play out in different ways that will give you the understanding of what's coming. Right now, what I can tell you is you can prepare on your own, and that is to live with less use of planetary resources, because they are going to be scarce. And if they are not scarce, then they will be very pricey, because the group that are administering water, electricity, and the resources are big collaborations and cooperations that are run by the matter and greed factions. So they will lift the price for that one. So we might as well, before that happens in 3 to 5 years' time, it's already in the move in Denmark. As I said, the electricity, it's already happening. We had a little bit of that hiccup a couple of years ago, and then there wasn't anything last year, and then we forgot about it, which is how they do it. And now it's back, and people are not aware of it because it's not in the media, it's not really been talked about, and they just call it inflation. So the first time around, where they actually gave us a head up in the news and in everywhere, you were looking, oh, electricity is very expensive, you should save it between this and that, and it fluctuates over the course of the day, and so forth. Then we got the heads up, this is how it's going to go. And then it all fizzled out, and it was not necessary for over a year, and now it's back. But now they're not talking about it. Now it's the ones that are in the know, the ones that knows what to look for. They know, because I got a little very special app that shows me the fluctuation of the price. We know when it's cheapest and when it's most expensive. So they have produced the app. So they're literally saying, we told you so. It's inflation. Everybody knows it. So that's all up to you. The same on prices on food, etc., etc. So that's up to those of us who have eyes to see with and ears to hear with. We know that it's happening, and we are adjusting to it. And we are learning not to be caught by the anger that these groups deliberately are generating by rising the prices. You see, that's the whole game. Anger, lack, fear, greed, and everything that comes with suddenly not having a world you are used to, and everything is just a kind of a chaos energy. And only the ones that are resilient and are ready, as I talked about in the Changemaker material, will have the skill sets and the tools to continue building on the subsidiary timeline. So fear is not part of our book. We can get hit by the collective fear. The other day I was in contact with one of the ones that joined the webinar on the 7th, and there was this humongous fear parasite playing all over the field in that person's energy system, and it jumped, and I got this imprint of it, and I felt that fear, and it's very unpleasant to feel that amount of fear. But if that happens, again, with all energetic parasites that jumps or that infuses us, that begins to create different types of thought forms that contaminates our mental field, that creates different types of electrochemical processes that contaminates our emotional fields and send us into all sorts of weird thought forms and scenarios and fears, and we spiral off into whatever kind of inner drama of some sort. The whole point is sit down, double hand position, Calm your heart field down. Breathe. Observe the reality around you. Look outside the window. Go out, breathe in the air, feel the ground beneath your feet, and look into your local community and see what's happening. Smile to the people around you and see this is calm and peace. You're not in Third World War, so there's no need for that fear. But that fear is there to ramp up the subcurrent level of lack that will force people to go out and, hoard to a degree that's ridiculous. And with that, of course, make whatever's out there even more scarce, and then everybody has hoarded it and is part of their stockpiling, and then it's just standing there rotting, and again and again and again, all of these things where we just kind of calm down. Could we please have a rational human here that are just thinking straight? And that's one of the main things of us that are facilitators. If we get swayed by these collective waves, we get ourselves into the nodal point, into the midpoint, and then we reconnect, and then we stay focused. Now, there might be this kind of fear that we will contaminate the subsidiary timeline, but that's the new Andromeda technology. If we in any ways or forms are not in alignment with the subsidiary timeline code configuration, and our code sequences are not in alignment with the subsidiary timeline, we get thrown off. And then we get thrown right back into the main timeline. And that's part of the battle that's been going on between the factions and those of us who are trying to get onto the subsidiary timeline. This constant, when we had 3, 4, 5 timelines, because we had quite a lot of alternate timelines, not subsidiary, but alternate timelines, which each one had played itself out as the different factions left. In a way, whenever there's a faction that is here having different types of projects here that are part of the artificial 4th or 5th dimension, under the scavengers and the colonizing groups, they have created a subsidiary timeline where they could operate. It's completely normal technology. As they took off, these timelines have collapsed, and then we were down to 3 main timelines. One that was focused on the past, one that was in the now, and now that would lead to the future Earth. The past timeline is for those who are on the main timeline are now going into the critical, disastrous past of the 2-8 pillar. The now will play that one out, and the future they will go to will be the dark devastation cycle. So those of us who are on the subsidiary timeline, our past will be as part of inner Earth. We will be in the now as nodal points where the giving over from inner Earth, which eventually will give it all over, the collapse and cease to exist, then we'll only have the now and the future technology from New Andromeda, as well as the potential future in the safe zone. So this is how it works. Eventually, the past will cease to exist for all of us that are on the subsidiary timeline, because as inner Earth cease to exist, we no longer have a past. The Pillar Project is gone. All we've got left is our own memories, but if we have clear timelines, we don't have any past. And that's why we're not getting recirculated into the main timeline when we die, because we are disconnected from the past. So all we have is the now. And that's our new center point. That's the core of sovereignty that we have in the now, where we're administering who and what we are in the now. So that's why when we get hit by the collective waves of whatever's going on, get into your sovereignty, get into your core, get into your nodal point of your existence as it is right now. If there are memories that do tie to past timelines that are part of the 2-8 pillar, you will see it right away. That's why you get infused with it. The jumper that comes, if it stays and it lingers on, that means you have code sequences for it. If you can get rid of it pretty quickly, it means you don't have it. Then it's just an imprint. Then you remove the imprint, and then the parasite vanishes and gets drawn back to the one that sent it out. So these are some of the dynamics with the understanding of why at some point we must let go of the past completely. Everything we was and were and was and could have been, let all of that go, and all you are is who and what you are in the now, who you are now, this moment, right here. Feel your body, feel your feet, relax, breathe, and just self-scan, heal, get the code sequences back up and running, and reunite with the subsidiary timeline. If you get hit so hard that you get removed from it altogether and get too ingrained into the main timeline, well, then you will have to do what you've trained so far. Then you have to remove whatever's there of past timelines, whether they're artificial, whether it's yours or it's been intercepted, or you have been under some kind of heavy influence or whatever it is, because these are some of the challenges I've gone through as well. Then you clear yourself out of the imprints of the technology, the parasites, the code systems, etc., 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 until you get to that point where you reunite with your core energies, reconnect to the core of the sun, and then begin to have the infusions from inner earth in the 5th dimensional level, and you begin to have the biological infusions from inner earth on the 4th dimensional level, and then you will be able to see the technology of New Andromeda. You're able to see all of these things, including the safe zone. You can see it. It's not something you can describe, but you know exactly what it is, and you can see it. Because then once you get back on the subsidiary timeline, it reveals to you what you can do with it. It reveals to you what you should do with it, and it reveals to you the work that you have to do. And that means we no longer have what we call a choice. The only choice we have here is to stay on the subsidiary timeline, arrange ourselves so we stay on it. Whenever we get thrown off, then make the choice to get back on it. But what we're doing with our everyday life will be administered from the information level and from the different types of information systems and co-sequences we will get from the subsidiary timeline. And with that, I will end this podcast. Thank you.